Find somebody, wave at somebody, throw them a fist bump, throw an elbow bump, somebody maybe that you haven't seen before. You can be seated if you want to. Pastor Kyle's already mentioned it, but I want to say for myself this morning, if you are visiting with us, thank you for choosing us. Thank you for choosing to be at the Avenue this morning. You could have been in a lot of churches. There are a lot of great churches, even right here in our own hometown. But we're glad that you picked us today. We're honored that you picked us. Does anybody at the Avenue agree this morning? Let's give those that are visiting with us a big hand. Thank you for being here. You don't want to miss this evening. And as they've said before, it doesn't matter if you've got a teenager in our youth ministry or a child in our children's ministry. That doesn't matter. This is for the whole church. It's a back-to-school bash, but we can come even if we don't have a kid in those ministries and still participate. So we're going to enjoy that. We were so hoping to have it outside. It looks like today that we're going to be able to. We just don't know. The weather is very unpredictable, isn't it? So right now it looks like we're going to be able to, but I'm thankful that the guys, they have our staff, they've got the backup plan, and it's ready to go just in case we're not able to. We'll have fun inside too. It's really just about being together. I was hoping to have it outside because I want to see some people go off that blob. So am I going to shoot you off of it? Probably not. Somebody will. But anyway, I'm going to take some pictures of your kid going off of it, if you'll let them, or your team going off of it, or you going off of it. We'll have fun with it. All right? So make sure you're there. 5 o'clock, they're starting the festivities, going to eat later. So just come on that time if you want to, or come when you can, and we'll have a great evening. All right? I want to talk to you this morning from the book of 2 Kings chapter 7. If you want to turn there with me to, we're not going to read it just yet, so let's don't put that up. Just turn to 2 Kings chapter 7 and hold on to that. We're going to look at verse 3 through 11. 2 Kings chapter 7, verse 3 through 11. That's where I am right now in my personal study. How many of you have read both books of Kings? You've read 1st and 2nd Kings. If you haven't, you need to do so. Sometimes we see those as boring books. It's just about the kings. It's about this king, he did bad, and this king followed him and he did bad, or this king followed him and he did good. And we think that's all there is to the book of 2 Kings, 1st and 2nd Kings. There's so much truth, so much to learn from those books. Thank you, Pastor Greg. For those of you that have read chapter 7, I know some of you raised your hand and said that you had read both books of the Kings, so you have also read chapter 7. But for those of you that have not, you really need to listen closely. I want you to read that later. If you read it today or you read it tomorrow or you read it sometime throughout the week, I want you to read especially that chapter. So let me give you just a little bit of a foundation before we go further, okay? So sort of hang with me here. If you miss the foundation, you're going to miss the rest of the house, all right? I want to get you to the roof, but if you miss the foundation, you're going to get closed in on. So I need you to hear the foundation. Chapter 7 in 2 Kings, the story sort of goes like this. We're not going to read the scriptures yet, but the entire city at this point was under a siege. If you know anything about this chapter and this story, catch this. The city was under a siege. The Syrian army, or as the scripture tells it, an Aramean or Aramean army, however you want to pronounce that, had basically taken over and wanted to annihilate the Israelites. They were doing so by cutting off the supply lines to where they couldn't get food into the city. And this was an attempt to starve them out of the city. This is why the whole city was under a famine and there was no food. Eventually, the enemy thought, you know what? We'll starve them out. They're going to have to come out at some point to find food. They'll have to come out to hunt. They'll have to come out to go to the marketplace. They'll have to find food somewhere. And so if we starve them out, then maybe we can get them out. It was really a genius military idea. But actually, things had gotten a lot worse inside those city gates than people realized. Because if you read the chapter before, you find out that some of them had turned to cannibalism and were cooking and eating human beings. It had reached that point, rather gross and graphic, isn't it? But that's the story. It had reached that point to where they had turned some of them to cannibalism. Now, outside the gate of the city, if you were standing on the outside of the gate of the city, there were 4 lepers who had been laying by that gate every day. Now, keep in mind, a person with leprosy was a person of rejection. They were lonely people. If you had leprosy, they didn't want you in the city. They didn't want you anywhere around them. They didn't want you anywhere around their children. They definitely didn't want you in their homes. If you were in a camp and somebody had leprosy, they would put you outside the camp a certain distance away for so many days or so many weeks because you were considered unclean. You were considered contagious. Now, the Bible doesn't say how long these men had been camping out outside the gate of the city, but they had obviously been there long enough that these 4 men were growing very tired and very frustrated of their condition. They were growing very tired and very frustrated of what they were having to deal with from day to day. Has anybody been there? Anybody there right now? You're tired and frustrated about some conditions in your life, some things that are going on. They had reached that point. So let's pick up the story in verse 3 of 2 Kings chapter 7. If you're ready, say amen. It says this: Now there were 4 men with leprosy at the entrance of the city gate. Listen to this. Here they began to communicate one another. They said to each other, "Why stay here until we die?" Everybody say that question right now. Say that question, go. That's a big one this morning. If we say we'll go into the city, the famine is there. Picture these guys standing outside trying to contemplate this thing and what they're going to do. They said, if we say we'll go into the city, the famine is there and we'll die. If we stay here, we will die. So let's go over to the camp. Listen to their plan. Let's go over to the camp of the Arameans and surrender. If they spare us, we live. If they kill us, then we die. Sounds like a plan, right? It's not really all that exciting, but it sounds like a plan. At dusk, they got up and went to the camp of the Arameans. When they reached the edge of the camp, no one was there. For the Lord had caused the Arameans to hear the sound of chariots and horses and a great army, so that they said to one another, "Look, the king of Israel has hired the Hittites and the Egyptian kings to attack us." So they got up and fled in the dusk and abandoned their tents and their horses and donkeys. They left the camp as it was and ran for their lives. Verse 8, the men who had leprosy reached the edge of the camp, entered one of the tents, and ate and drank. They took silver, gold, and clothes and went off and hid them. They returned, did it all over again, y'all. They entered another tent, took some things from it, and hid them also. Then they said to each other, "What we're doing is not right." We're going to hit that in just a moment. What we're doing is not the right thing. This is a day of good news, and we are keeping it to ourselves. If we wait until daylight, punishment will overtake us. Let's go at once and report this to the royal palace. So they went and called out to the city gatekeepers and told them, "We went into the Aramean camp, and no one was there, not a sound of anyone, only tethered horses and donkeys, and the tents left just as they are." The gatekeepers shouted the news, and it was reported within the palace. Turn to a couple people and tell them you need to listen to this word this morning. I did that for 2 reasons. I did it so you'll say it, and I did it so I could get some water, let's be honest. So these men had 3 choices. Anybody know what the choices were? They could either go back, they could stay where they were, or they could move. 3 choices. I want you to keep that in mind. Go back, stay, or move. Go back, stay, or move. Go back, stay, or move. Let's talk about the first one, go back. Go back where? Where could they go? Back into the city? Remember a few weeks ago, I preached the message. This might be a little bit comical. I preached the message a few weeks ago telling you needed to go back. Everybody remember that? A few of you? You remember that? Today I'm telling you, don't go back. I told you I was going to confuse the fire out of you. A few weeks ago, I wanted you to go back. But there are moments to go back, right? How many of you realize that going back is a good thing when you can go back and remember the miracles that God's done in your life to get you through today? That's going back. There's some things you don't want to go back to. Why? Because it hurts too much. There are too many bad memories that go along with those stories. So you want to go back and relive them. I get it. But there's sometimes I have to go back in order to get me through today. Remember me saying that? In order to get me through this moment, I need to go back to the moments of the past. I need to go back to the favor of the past, the blessings of the past, the miracles of the past, the power that I experienced in the past, the authority that I spoke in the past, and how it got me through then, how to get me through now. But going back, you'll get it if you go back and listen to that message. Going back for these lepers was not an option. Everybody's listen to this. Going back for these lepers was not an option, but yet it was an option. Why? They could have snuck back into the city, but there were some problems with that. First of all, they had leprosy, and nobody would have wanted them there. They would have probably run them back out of the city because there was no food. I mean, why go? Because there's a famine. I mean, we're not getting anything to eat out here, so why should we go back in and get food in there? Sometimes we are tempted to go back, not realizing that going back is not going to make things any better where we are. Going back can seem like the comfortable thing to do because it's what we know. Going back can seem like the comfortable thing to do because it's recognizable to us. Going back can seem like the comfortable thing to do because it's something that is familiar. How many of you understand that sometimes familiarity can be very dangerous in a Christian's walk? I'm going to say that again. Familiarity can oftentimes be a very dangerous thing in the walk of a Christian. But sometimes we do that, we go back because it's what we're familiar with. These lepers realized they wouldn't be any better off if they went back. So what they decided to do, we're going to talk about it in a minute. They had three choices. They could go back, they could stay, or they could move. They could go back, they could stay, or they could move. What about staying? Listen to me, the enemy, our enemy, the devil, has a plethora of weapons. But I believe that some of his most powerful weapons are the subtle ones. I believe that his most powerful weapons are sometimes those weapons that seem to fly under the radar. It seems to be those weapons that sort of hide themselves out in the crowd. It's those weapons that are clever. And one of the most powerful weapons of the devil is getting you, listen to this. One of the most powerful weapons of the enemy is getting you and me to settle where we are. Now let that sink in for a moment. I'm going to say that again, not just because I want to, but somebody needs to hear it. One of the most powerful weapons of the enemy is getting you and getting me to settle where we are. To reach a point to where our present condition, we almost accept the way it is. Has anybody ever been there before? You reached a point to where nothing was happening and you almost you settled. You settled for where you were. You settled for the condition you in. You settled for the situation that you were in. And it was a dangerous place to be. A powerful weapon of his to get us comfortable in our present state. If you're writing something down, write this down. If the devil can keep you where you are, then he can keep you from where you're supposed to be. Write it down. Somebody clue that in. Remember it. If the devil can keep you where you are, then he can keep you from where you're supposed to be. Is that right this morning? The word settle means to sit or come to rest in a comfortable position. To sit or come to rest in a comfortable position. It's a dangerous place to be in the Christian walk of faith. The devil loves it when we settle. Why? Because it makes his job a whole lot easier. Around our house, Jamie is the cook. Only once in a great while will you see me fire something up, and as of right now, neither one of us remembers when that last time was. She's usually the cook, and I'm usually the cleaner. Usually I'll come in after she gets done. She can make as big a mess as she wants to. I'll come in behind her. I'll have it all looking just as good as it did before she started cooking. And can she make a mess? I love it when she makes a mess because it's so good. I want her to make a mess. But there are times she will do things. I mean, when I grew up, some of you grew up the same way. My mom and dad would fix big meals sometimes, but then they would just put things in what's called a crock pot. And what we would do, we would come home after church. If we didn't go out to eat with folks, we'd come home after church. They'd put some homemade vegetable soup, or they'd put chili. They'd put something in that crock pot, some kind of soup or something. But there have been many times where Jamie would ask me to help her, and she knew my limited abilities in cooking, or at least my lack of trying. And maybe it's not that I'm limited in abilities, but my lack of even trying to cook, okay? I make a mean bowl of cereal and a good sandwich. That's about as far as I go. But if she ever puts on a crock pot of something, she'll let me get involved. And this is my involvement. I almost feel like a school kid. Kevin, I need you to run in there and go stir that up for me. I got to go do something else. So I get to stir the pot. That's my job. That's my assignment. And so she does the cooking. What I do, I go in there and stir it up. I remember I was in there one day and I stirred it up. She came in and she walked in the kitchen. I just went, whoo. Just slaving in the kitchen, mama. Slaving in the kitchen. I ain't done nothing but stir about 12 times in that pot. That's all I've done. Why did she have me stir it? Simply because many times when you make crock pot type stuff, you're going to put a lot of different things in it. And if you don't stir it every few minutes, what happens to it? It settles. Thank you, Pastor. It settles, doesn't it? If you don't stir it every few minutes, what happens to it? It settles, and it even begins to stick to the bottom. Now, here's something I want to bring out of that. If you don't go through there and stir it, and everybody please catch this, because some of you are right there. We have all been there before. If you don't go by every few minutes and stir up the ingredients inside the pot, the potential for flavor is lost. It's so quiet. Maybe you're thinking about it. If you don't go by the pot every few minutes and stir it up. Now, my job was just as important as hers, even though that's all I did. All I did was stir it. My job was very important. She cooked it. I had to stir the pot. If you don't go by, this can apply to your life. This can apply to the church. This can apply to many things. Sometimes in your life, your pot needs to be stirred. Sometimes in your marriage, the pot needs to be stirred. Sometimes in your relationships, the pot needs to be stirred. Sometimes there are situations on your job where the pot needs to be stirred. Sometimes things in your home need to be stirred. I want you to write this down. Potential has to be prodded in order for it to prosper. Potential has to be prodded in order for it to prosper. We were reminded we had such a great service, as Pastor Kyle has already mentioned, such a great service this past Wednesday. Some people truly received their healings in the midst of that service, and we're believing we're going to hear of more. Doesn't have to be in the middle of a service, amen? It can be afterwards. It can be before. And Josiah reminded us of something in that particular service, and it was this. He reminded us that there are things that God has placed on the inside of us, things that are sitting still. God has placed things on the inside of us that are sitting idle. There are things on the inside of every single person under the sound of my voice. Not a one of you looking at me right now is exempt from this. There are things on the inside of you that are wasting away. I want to see everybody raise your hand. Everybody in the room, raise your hand. Come on, everybody, everybody. What does that hand represent? That hand represents that there are things on the inside of you that are laying dormant. You can put your hands down. You say, Pastor, no, I'm working in the kingdom. I'm not saying you're not working in the kingdom. But there are things on the inside of you that need to be stirred. Are there things on the inside of me that need to be stirred? Yes, there are. There's an old saying that if you do the same thing over and over again, you're going to get what? If you do things over and over again the same way, what's going to happen? You're going to get what you've got. You're going to get the same thing. That can apply to any part of your life. If you want different results, you've got to do something different. Is that true, y'all? If you want different results, you've got to do something different. One of my favorite lines in my favorite movies, Rocky movies, one of my favorite lines is in the movie Creed 2, and he speaks this to him. Sylvester Stallone says these words: if you want to change things in a big way, then you've got to make big changes. I love it. If you want to change things in a big way, then you've got to make big changes. And that's tough for a lot of people. Why? Because some people, just the word change is frightening to them. They become very comfortable with where they are. They become very comfortable with the condition that they're living in right now. It's not the right condition. They may even realize it's not the right condition. But you know what? It's what they know. It's what they recognize. It's what they realize. It's what they've been used to. It's what they're accustomed to. And so they stay where they are. So these three men had a choice. I've already said it. That choice was what? They could go back into the city, which really wasn't an option. There was famine there, and people wouldn't want them there because of their leprosy. They could go back into the city. They could stay where they are. Or here's where I've been wanting to get you to this morning. They could move. They could go back to what they were used to and what they were accustomed to. They could stay in the condition where they were, which was not where they really needed to be. Or they could make a move. Now I want you to listen to me. When it comes to stirring the pot, sometimes you only need one person. And I'm going to venture to say that possibly that one person is right in here in this room that could stir the pot in some areas of this church. You don't need but one person. With them, they only needed four. As the story goes on, these men chose the third option, and they decided to move. So what did they do? They went over to a camp close by the city, the camp of their own enemies. The very enemies who had put their city in the predicament that they were in of having a famine. The very enemy who had cut the supply lines off, waiting on them to come out so they could attack them while they're looking for food to survive. They sat there and made a plan, and that plan was, let's go to the camp of the Arameans. If they spare us, we'll live. It's a very simple plan. If they spare us, we'll live. If they kill us, we'll die. Some of you are thinking, wow, what a plan. That was deep. If they spare us, we'll live. If they kill us, we'll die. But here's what they had to do. They got to a place of desperation that some of you need to get to. You need to get to a place of desperation where you're ready to move no matter what happens. You're ready to branch out. You're ready to do something different no matter what comes your way. They go into a camp. They get to the edge of the camp. They look across the entire camp and realize there's no human life. There's nobody there. There's no movement whatsoever in the camp. Now, I want you to imagine being one of those four lepers at that time. They've been laying next to a city gate, rejected by their own family and friends. Leprosy, nobody wants them anywhere around them and their families. They've been there for who knows, days, maybe weeks, maybe months, I don't know. They make a decision to go to an enemy's camp, of all camps, of all moves. We're going to go to the enemy. Why the enemy? They get to the camp and nobody is there. Now, I sort of imagined this a few days ago in my office in a little bit of a comical way. If I was one of these four guys and I had been going through everything that I've been going through, I make a decision to go to an enemy's camp not knowing if I'm going to live or die. I walk in and the whole camp is empty. I'm thinking right now, we have hit the jackpot. They walked in one of the tents, sat there and filled their bellies, Justin. They filled their bellies. They took gold. They took silver. They took clothes. Read the word. Took gold, silver, and clothes, took them out and took them somewhere and hid them. But you know what they did? They didn't stop there. Y'all, this was a smorgasbord. These guys had not eaten, and they don't know when. They go back, they find another tent, they go in that tent, they eat again, they get all the gold, they get the silver, they get the clothes, and they go back out. What they do, they hide them. That day, they realized they had truly hit the jackpot. Brand new clothes, gold and silver. We can sell this and live the rest of our lives on what we have got today. And we have eaten, we are full. We can go back and get all that we want. But I want you to listen. There was still some character about these four men. Now, some would say that wasn't stealing because All of the Arameans had left the camp completely dry. It was deserted, so to a lot of people that wouldn't be stealing. They left it all behind to whoever would pick it up. But there was still some character about these 4 men. I want you to listen to them. I believe one of them looked at the other 3 and he said, as the word said, you know what? This is not right what we're doing. He said, today is a day of good news. Now, why did he say this isn't right? What was not right about it? They had enough integrity about them to realize that what they were doing by eating all this food, gathering all of these jewels and clothes, it wasn't right unless they went back and told the people of their city. Is anybody following that? So they looked at each other and they said, this isn't right. This is a day of good news. We are keeping this to ourselves. But instead, they chose to go back to the city gates and report this to the royal palace. This was a jackpot that they were not willing to keep to themselves. So they reported it, and if you read later on in the story, you find that the rest of the city came out of the gates, went over to the camp, and began to eat and gather all those jewels for themselves. Now, Pastor, why are you telling us that was the right move? It wasn't right for them to sit there and keep it to themselves. But why was it right for them to go back and share it with the city? I want you to think about it for a moment. Because 4 lepers decided to make a move. 4 people, everybody was trying to avoid. 4 people that nobody wanted to be around. 4 people that everybody in one city had rejected, even their family. 4 men made a move, and I want you to look what happened. I want you to listen to this right here. Listen to this. Some of you don't realize this morning how important your move actually is. You oftentimes just think of yourself and what it might do for you. But how important is it for somebody else who is watching you, somebody who is going to be under your influence, to move if you make a move yourself? It only takes one. There are others who are watching you and waiting on you to do something. Pastor, why are they waiting on me? Why don't they move? Why? Because of your influence. They're waiting on you to move. And if you move, they will move. Some things in life happen simply by a chain reaction, and it takes one person to stir the pot, and others will follow. So what does that mean with these guys? In this story, 4 men made a move in an entire city. Please catch this morning, Avenue. 4 men made a move, and an entire city got blessed. 4 men stirred the pot, and an entire city reaped the benefits of it. 4 men decided to do something, and an entire city was favored. Sometimes God doesn't need an army. We pray for an army of God. We pray for an army of God, which He's got that army. But sometimes God doesn't need an army to do what He needs to do. Sometimes God just needs 4 soldiers who will enlist and say, I'll do whatever it takes. Is anybody catching that this morning? Please. 2 of you? That's incredible. Is anybody catching that this morning? Are you afraid to say amen because you're afraid you might be that soldier? Are you afraid to say something because you're afraid that you might be that person that needs to stir the pot in an area in your life, or maybe even here in our church? It only took 4, and the whole city benefited from the blessing of their move. How many of you want to be one of those soldiers that God calls to make that move and stir that pot? Come on, be careful. Be careful raising that hand, because He'll do it. How many of you would like to be one of those 4 soldiers that He calls on to stir the pot wherever it will be, and you're willing to do it and go the distance to see that change? Is that you this morning? Would you stand with me all over the building? I wasn't going to preach long to you today. I know we've got a big evening this evening and a lot to be done. Go back, stay, or move. I don't know how this applies to each of you individually. I think about my life, how it applies to me outside the church, but I also think about how it applies to our church. How does it apply to you individually this morning in your life? What does you thinking about your own life right now, what does go back, stay, or move actually mean to you? Think about that portion of your life that needs change. Think about that part of your life that something needs to be different. And then go home today and answer that question. I'm not asking you to answer it right here. It may take you some time to think this through. What area of your life needs to change? And you need to ask you that question. Do I need to go back? Do I need to stay where I am? Or do I need to move? It only took 4. It only took 4. God didn't need a whole army to win the battle. He didn't need an entire military to stir the pot. He only needed a few willing vessels. Listen to me. He only needed a few willing vessels who were tired enough of the status quo that they were willing to step forward and start a change. And they say, Pastor, you're a pastor. You're applying all that to church. Can I apply it to this church? You don't even know how many ways. But it's not just about us here. It's about you and your life individually. What does that mean to you? Go back, stay, or move. What is it going to be? Would you pray with me? If you want to lift your hands and pray, then do so. If you want to lift your hands and surrender. Father, many times we preach messages, we teach messages, we perform devotions, and we don't know what it means to each person individually. I don't know how this is hitting each one here, but God, you do. You are big enough to know where every person in this room and every person across every church in this world is right now in their walk with you. I'm believing, or I would have never brought this word, that there are some that are going to go home today and this week, and they're going to think about that area of their life and ask themselves this question. Is this a time for me to go back to where things were? Should I stay where I'm at for just a while, wait this thing out and see what happens? Or should I make a move? Am I at a place to where I am so tired of the way things are? I need big changes, so I've got to make big changes. I need to do something different, so I'm going to have to do something different to make it happen. Father, I pray for anybody in this room this morning who has heard this message and they are debating, they are considering, they are contemplating, where do I go from here? I pray clarity in somebody's life today. I pray, God, that you would make yourself real to somebody here today. I pray, God, that you would reveal yourself to somebody here today, somebody who is debating their next move and whether or not they should even move at all. Do I go back? Do I stay? Or do I move? Come on, is that you this morning? I see some of you. Is that you this morning? If that's you and you want prayer before we leave this room, I challenge you to come. Come on, Pastor, I'm in that place of decision.
Yes, come on. Thank you. Thank you for obeying the Lord this morning. I've said it many times, don't stand where you are and try to examine your way out of the moment. That's what the enemy wants you to do. Don't stand where you are and settle. I need some of you that are altar workers to come and gather with these in prayer. Come on. Come on. Are you at that place of decision? Pastor, do I return? Do I stay where I'm at? Or do I need to make a move? Some of you, before this message ever came today, you've been laying awake at night. I know it. I sense it in my spirit. You've been laying awake at night, contemplating this very decision, contemplating these very choices. What do I do? God, for those that have come forward, those that may be standing and waiting, those that are at home listening by live stream, I speak that word again, clarity. God, make it known to somebody. For those that have been struggling and toiling for the right thing, those that have been struggling, weeping in the midnight hour, wondering, where do I go from here? I pray, God, you clear things up for them. If you're standing back there, don't be an onlooker or bystander. Point your hands this way if you would and pray for these. Would you do that right now? Come on. All over the building. Let's bind together in prayer for these. Come on, speak that word with me to them right now. Clarity. God, give them clarity. Speak that word with me. That seems to be the theme of the end of this service this morning, clarity. God, speak it into them. Come on, sing that with him. There is power. Break every chain. Break every chain. There is power in the name of Jesus. There is power in the name of Jesus to break every chain. Shout my way up to the mountain. I will take hold of the truth of your promise. I'm gonna praise, I'm gonna push through till every lie crumbles. I'm gonna dance in the midst of the rain. I'm gonna rest in the arms of the Father. Come on, sing it. I'm gonna my way up to the mountain. Take hold of the truth of your promise. And I'm gonna praise. I'm gonna praise. I'm gonna push through till every lie crumbles. I'm gonna